So this is a little session looking at wild alliums, or you might know them as wild onions or wild leeks or wild garlic, which is the main one that a lot of folk know about. So I've got two different types of wild allium here. This one with the broad leaves, and this is a little bit yellow because it picked yesterday, but I'll maybe find a nicer one. This one with the broad leaves is what is generally known as wild garlic, or ramsons, or ramps it's sometimes called. The Latin name is Allium ursinum. Ursinum is to do with bear, so it's sometimes also called bear garlic. And there's different stories about that it grows in the woods where there are bears. Bears like to eat it, who knows. And this one has the leaves are out for quite a while, and then it brings out a single flower stalk, and when these open out they've got like a little kind of set of flowers that sit like this, so that's wild garlic. And then the other one we're going to talk about is few flowered leek, and this one has a significantly kind of more slender leaf, and when the flowers come out, people have described it as looking like lily of the valley, so this little kind of bobbing flower. And then behind the flower it has what are called bulbils, and these are the bits of the plant that go on to set seed and then create new plants. So between the two of them, the few flowered leek and the wild garlic, the few flowered leek is actually considered invasive. So I'm being quite careful with this stuff that I have here, because if I were to drop any of these little bulbils, strictly speaking, I'd be breaking the law, but also it would be potentially introducing this quite invasive species into the concrete gardens, which I definitely wouldn't want to do. So you've got to be careful when you're dealing with few flowered leek, and you often see the two of them growing together. But I would recommend, if you see a lot of this, to pick this instead of the wild garlic. Just be super, super careful and put everything. I tend to wrap it in paper and then put it in a plastic bag and put it in my bag, just to make sure I'm not dropping any in another part of the area where I am. They're both really tasty and can be used pretty much interchangeably. So you might have tried wild garlic in things like dips, and pestos are very popular. And we're also going to be doing some fermenting with them as well. If you have an area where there isn't any few flowered leek, then absolutely go ahead and pick your wild garlic. And you might notice I've done the thing that we're always discouraged from doing with foraging, which is I've uprooted this plant, but that was intentional. It's because this is an invasive species, and I would only do that with these kind of considered very, very invasive species. There is a third wild garlic in this family. So this is Allium paradoxum, or paradoxical garlic. This one's Allium ursinum, is the wild garlic. And then there's a third one called Allium triquetrum, which is three-cornered leek. It looks very similar to the few flowered leek, so you sometimes kind of would abbreviate them to FFL and TCL. So the FFL and the TCL have the same kind of leaf here, the kind of finer leaf than the wild garlic, but the flower head is quite different. It's got multiple flower heads, so that's why this one's called few flowered leek, because it is fewer. And the inside the little white flowers that kind of open up, there's a tiny little green line along the middle of each petal. So they're very pretty, but I don't see them a lot around Glasgow. They're not particularly common. It's these two that we tend to use. So yeah, so that's the introduction to wild alliums.